Good morning. Welcome to Armenia, Colombia. Looks like a bunch of people were waiting. As always, somebody make sure that you can hear me, you can see me. Today, I'm going to cover just a lot of feedback I've been getting that I think is important enough to respond to beyond just writing. And for all the people that sent me best wishes because I had the flu, thank you. I appreciate it. I do feel better. It lasted a little longer than I expected. Usually, if I get the flu, it's maybe 3 days or so. This was a little longer. Kept me in the apartment. Actually, I only went out one time this past week, and that was to help out a friend. And you'll see that in a video tomorrow that's coming out. So, no, I didn't get the Circassia. I really hope to do that tomorrow. I feel a lot better. Fever's gone. I've got some energy back, so should be good to go. Okay. I brought it up last time because it keeps getting mentioned to me about having a special live, probably on a Saturday evening, about dating in Colombia. And to a person who sent a comment that was kind of on the nasty side about don't do it, not to me personally, but don't do it. You know, Colombia's had enough problem in its past. It doesn't need promoting sexpat tourism, and that I think everybody here knows that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about dating as if you were from California and you were coming to upstate New York, and I might give you some clues on some do's and don'ts or how to go about things because it would be different there than it would be in California. I'm not talking about having a string of one night stands. I mean, if you want to do that, you can, go to any internet site, I'm sure, and just pay your way through. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about dating to find somebody of some meaning for your life. And so I got 0 responses. I asked in the last coffee time, if you're interested, let me know. And depending on the response is when I'll set this up. And I said it could be as soon as this last Saturday, yesterday. I got 0 responses. I put a written note up this morning on the YouTube channel, just saying that. And then I got 8 responses this morning saying, yeah, they want me to do it. So I really need to do it because I need to have some kind of confirmation that there's interest, because I don't want to do a video just for the sake of doing it. And as I've explained before, this is not even a video or a live chat that I'm all that comfortable with to begin with. So, I will only do it if I think there's a real desire to get some information. So that's that. I got 8. Bear with me here. Okay, there was a comment. Somebody watched the videos from back in Cuenca, and I think it was 10 things you need to know and to live in Cuenca, Ecuador. And these things apply pretty much in most places. But one of the comments that I made early on in that video was that, well, I'll read what he said it was, which is not quite there, but he says, half of the people leave who live there. And then he comments on that, baloney. I know dozens and dozens that live there for a long time with no problems. I'm going to respond to it only because I have been asked about this a number of times. And so even though this one, it's so obviously kind of misguided, I think it deserves to be answered. So what I say is that half of the people that move to Cuenca, Ecuador, leave in the first year. And then to further that, half of the half that are left leave within the next 3 years. So that's a quarter of those that came, stay. But what you have to understand is that it's a revolving door. If you don't believe that, look at Gringo Post. That's an online kind of like a Craigslist thing. You post up an ad if you got things for sale or if you're looking for something. It's very useful if you're living in Cuenca. And every time that comes out, which is every day, you're going to see 2 or 3 gringos that are selling their things because they're leaving. That's as anecdotal as what he said. He knows dozens and dozens. Well, if you have a population of around 5,000 from the United States, 1,500 from Canada in Cuenca, and that number, while it goes up and down, it remains relatively stable. As many people go out as come in. So it remains relatively stable. But the longer you live there, the more you see people coming and going. You just see coming and going. And you start to notice a trend, a pattern of the people. When you start to see comments that they're making, it's like, well, they're going to be gone soon. And just because when you see so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, it develops a pattern. And so it becomes almost predictable, with exceptions, of course. But it happens to be true. And I didn't make it up. I had access to, now it's been a couple of years since I looked at these stats, but I had access to the immigration stats for Ecuador and specifically for Cuenca. I have friends actually in administration in the government, and I was asking questions about it, and they just printed off some stuff, brought it back, and I went through it, and that's where it comes from. I didn't make it up. It's just what it is. Now, if you're dealing with thousands of people, the fact that dozens and dozens have actually stayed and you know about it, well, yeah, of course. I didn't say everybody leaves, but there's a massive group of people that leave. And my point in this is always, it's because they're getting wrong information and they come and their expectations are blown out the window. Most of them cover it up. Most of them create their own little fantasy world about how perfect everything is. And nothing is ever perfect anywhere. And if you can't face up to the reality of the issues, then you're not going to do real well in the long term, because sooner or later, you're going to have to face them. And those are the things that I always talk about, and people say, well, you're running down Cuenca, Ecuador. No, I'm just being realistic, because you have so many people that are simply lying about it. They're just making it sound like paradise on earth, and it's not. For example, just one example, it gets cold there. It gets quite cold there. I've seen it snow in Cuenca. Now, I was called a liar, like I would make that up. Except if they're there the past few months, 3, 4, 5 months, maybe they listen to me and believe me. I've walked out on mud puddles that you could walk across because they were frozen. It can get very cold there. Now, it doesn't get like that all the time, and that snow, maybe once every 4 or 5 years, but I saw one, and it gets real cold there. Now, people come there thinking, well, I don't need a heater and I don't need air conditioning. The weather's perfect. And guess what? It's not. It's not perfect. It doesn't mean it's not a good climate. I think it's a nice climate there. If it wasn't for the altitude, I might still be there. But you can't pretend that it's something else. And all you're hearing about these last 4 or 5 months is how cold it is there and how people are freezing to death and they're wearing all these coats and looking to buy heaters. But you know what? I see that every year. I see people say these things every year. Now it's colder than normal, but even in its normal situation, you have cold. And so I point these things out, and then I get the haters who want to pretend it's not true. But if you're pretending it's not true, you're not facing, I mean, look, it doesn't mean it's not a good place to live. I happen to like that climate. But if it does tell you that maybe you want to bring an electric blanket, and maybe you didn't bring one because everybody told you the weather was perfect and you didn't need one. So facing reality just means that you have ways to adjust to it, to cope with it, to accommodate for it. Or if you're in a situation where you absolutely cannot be in that cold, then you're forewarned. And so in my videos, I'm always trying to get away from this Pollyanna fairy tale about whatever a place is and try to inject a little reality into it. And in Cuenca, there's a lot of wonderful things, but there's a lot of things that have been lied about for so long that it becomes the de facto truth, except it's not. And so I talk about those. So that's my answer to that guy and anybody else who wanted to know those things. Okay. Okay, so username Sugar Skull something, but Sugar Skull as I remember, who gave a donation last time. Thank you very much. He had a question. And for some reason on the donation, it's hard for me to read the chat. It's very difficult on this. On regular YouTube, I can read it fine, but on this, it's very difficult. And on his donation, he had $4.99, and then as part of it, there was some print in there with a question. Simply didn't see it. All I saw was the yellow bar for the, or the whatever color bar it was for the donation, which again was greatly appreciated. Thank you. And on that note, I'm almost to goal for this month, so thank you guys. But he had a question, and this applies to Colombia. Have you noticed that you have become more frugal living in Colombia versus the USA, considering things like food, electric bills, transportation, etc.? Well, have I become more frugal? I became more frugal when I ran into a financial problem. And that's what tends to happen. You know, you tend to spend, I mean, the more money you have, the more money you tend to spend. And I'm not always like that, but I did kind of get like that. Not to anything crazy, but when you get, you know, when you really get socked with a real financial problem, let's go back and look at our budget. Let's reevaluate, reassess. So I got very frugal, but not because I was necessarily in Colombia. It's because life does that to you sometimes. Now, do you become frugal simply by living here? Actually, with most people, it tends to have the opposite effect. What happens is, and this is dramatically so in Ecuador, because there's a lot of costs in Ecuador that it takes time to realize. And people spend without realizing that until it catches up with them. Here in Colombia, it's more what we're familiar with. It's more of a direct comparison. So what tends to happen here is people will see, oh, this is cheap and that's cheap and my rent's cheap, my electric's cheap, and all these things. There's so much less than what I'm used to spending, about 25%. Therefore, I have more money to spend, and they tend to start spending more than they normally would. I see that far more often. Now, can you come here and be really frugal? And by that, I mean, can you live under $800 a month? That is difficult. For a while, I had to live under $1,000 a month. And had I known I was going to do that, I could have chosen an apartment that was half the money, and that would have put me in an okay situation. but because I didn't know, I mean, my apartment's only $260 a month, so it's not like I'm breaking the bank. But I didn't realize what was going to happen. Then it happened, and I've got a lease. So all that meant was I just really dialed it back. I ended up staying in a lot, uh, just just living cheap, because you can live cheap here. Uh, can you live on $200 or $300 a month? I mean, no, no, that's not living. Um, you can be frugal here. Let's say, for example, you want to live as cheap as possible, and you want to live the way I was living when I had to, so that whatever money you have beyond that, you can save it. Yeah, you can do that. You could probably, anything over $1,000, you could probably bank away. I would recommend, if you're single and you're living in a place like Armenia, that around $1,400 is a nice life. Not, I mean, you're not balling it, but it's a nice, comfortable life. Now, that's not the case in Medellin. In Medellin, it's going to be considerably more. As a matter of fact, I want to talk about Medellin coming up here. So, do I find myself living a more frugal life as compared to? I lived the last 3 years in Ecuador, and in Cuenca it was kind of expensive. Um, Year two of those 3 years, I lived in a little town called Giron, and it was quite inexpensive there. I rented a 5 bedroom, 5 bathroom mini mansion in a beautiful location with waterfalls behind me, and that was $250 a month. And a haircut was $2, and lunch was $1.50, and I could go down to the tienda and buy food for the week for about $18. So that town was quite inexpensive. And if you go to rural areas in Ecuador, you can live pretty inexpensive. But if you go where everybody else is piling in and prices are driven up years ago, actually, it's not that much worse. It's going to cost you more. And here in Colombia, it's no different. It's no different anywhere. If you go to a place that's popular with tourists or people coming there to move, prices go up. So in Colombia, you have that with Medellin. It's very popular. Uh, Tens of thousands of people come there. I mean, it's a massive tourist spot. Even though there are barrios that you can live considerably for less money, but in the places that most people want to live, of course, the prices are going to be real high. I was looking at rentals in an off the beaten path barrio, but a nice barrio in Medellin, and the rent there was on average about double what it is here in Armenia. So yeah, I guess you have to look at what your priorities are. But yeah, you can live cheaper here in Armenia than you can in Cali, Bogota, or Medellin. But then again, it's a smaller place. All right, what else we got? We're about 10 minutes out. So if you got questions, you can go ahead and start posting them up. I talked about some other vloggers in last week's coffee time, and I was surprised the feedback I got, some emails, some comments, things like, what about Gabriel Traveler? Well, he didn't really apply to what I was talking about, because he doesn't stay anywhere. I mean, he's constantly moving, and he'll spend a couple days here, a couple days there. And the thing is, how do you really get to know a place and give any real advice if somebody's not as a tourist but planning to go and live there? Well, you can't. It takes time. It takes time to learn a place. And so I think he's cool. He does a good job. There's not much in his videos for me. I've traveled a lot. Sometimes I'll see something that's like, oh, let me take a look, see if it's changed much since I was there. So I like his videos. I think he does a good job, but it's not anything I would recommend if you're looking for a place to live, because he doesn't, that's not what he does. And just to address to people, you know who you are, uh, there were a couple favorites that I had. For Colombia, Marshall Powell, I thought was awesome. I actually chatted with him a little bit here and there. Really decent guy. I loved his take on, he just saw things the way they were and commented accordingly. He never tried to paint any kind of flowery picture. He doesn't do them anymore, which is unfortunate. He was very good at it. But he's got a series, Marshall Powell, you can look this up. He's got a bunch of them going around in Colombia, and he lived in Armenia for a little while. You might find that interesting. And in Cuenca, there was a couple that was there for a fairly short time, Slava and Karen. And I enjoyed their videos, but they had the same disease as a lot of people, is they put out information before they knew what it was they were talking about. But what I really enjoyed was when they started going to restaurants and reviewing the restaurants. I actually love that. And I think Cuenca needs that. I never did, well, I did hamburgers and I did some were more tongue in cheek. And when I would just go out to eat, I would talk a little bit about it, but not actual reviews. I mean, you would watch them take bites and see their expressions. And it would be good if somebody was doing that, just doing restaurant reviews in Cuenca. I'm not comfortable having somebody watch me pig out on something. So I just never, it just never was something I wanted to do. So I didn't cover all the vloggers, but the thing is, there's very few that are actually giving information that would help you long term. There's really very few doing that, like a couple. And here in Colombia, it's not much different. Most people are kind of coming through and hitting a place, for a little while and then, leaving again. And it takes time. If you're coming here to visit, 2 weeks isn't going to cut it. It's going to tell you all the honeymoon things about how wonderful it is, but it's not going to tell you how, the honeymoon's over and that, that giggle that you had that was cute now is driving me crazy. Well, places are the same way. So it takes some time. So whether it's just you passing through or if it's a vlogger, you need more information. Is Medellin, Colombia? It's a version of it. It's a form of it. I mean, is San Francisco the United States? No, it's unique, but it's in the United States, and it has aspects of the United States. Medellin is in Colombia, and it has aspects of Colombia, but is it the real Colombia? I don't know. I don't know if you can really say either way on that. But what I will say is that it's certainly been influenced heavily by the tourists or people that have moved there. There's a lot of people that come to work there for 1 or 2 years and leave. So there's a big churning. There's more so than in Cuenca, Ecuador. There's a big turnover in Medellin, and people come and they're shocked to find out how expensive it is to live there. And as was just noted here, and it's true, the rents there can be as high or higher than the United States in many places, to a similar type place. So people, they come to Medellin and they think they're coming to a place that's going to be inexpensive and it's going to be all these things that they have in their mind. And Medellin isn't that place. What it is a very nice modern city with a lot to offer. And if you're into nightlife and partying, I mean, it's as good as anywhere. but it has its pollution. It's the traffic is crazy. You know, like everywhere, it has its downsides. Bigger the city, the more crime issues there are, and that holds true in Colombia as well as anywhere. So I won't say, if you go to Medellin and you think you know Colombia, I'll say no, you don't. You don't know Colombia. I'm living in the heart of Colombia, where much of its history comes from, and there are aspects about Colombia that don't exist here either. And when you go to south in Pasto, you find a completely different type of population with different customs and standards. And they're really more like, Pasto reminds me of Cuenca, Ecuador. I mean, it's even geographically situated inside a ring of mountains like Cuenca. Similar altitude, the same type of people. The number one food there is cuy, the local food. So there's a huge range of culture. What you have in Cartagena or Santa Marta, which are more, beach, heavily touristed areas, or if you go to Cali, you've got a different population there. So Colombia is, think of it like the United States, where is upstate New York like Selma, Alabama, or is Alabama like Utah? It has its differences, and in some cases, you think you're in a completely different country. And the same holds true. But Medellin is probably more removed from the original culture of Colombia than most places, simply because of the tourist factor. So I don't know what more to say about it. I think Medellin is a great place. It's not for me. It's just too big. Any big city, I don't care for the pollution, the traffic. It's just not for me. If I were to choose a place other than Armenia, probably be Manizales, an amazing place. And I'll say the same for Cuenca, Ecuador. I mean, is Cuenca, Ecuador representative of Ecuador? And I'll have to say, not especially. It is unique, and people of Ecuador recognize that it is unique. So the impact of expats, the impact of tourism, I'm not even making a judgment on good or bad. I mean, it brings a lot of good, it brings a lot of negative, but it certainly has its effect. And so if you want to know Ecuador, then I would suggest you get out and travel to some other towns that are not blasted by, the visitors. And I would say the same thing in Colombia. I mean, there's so much more to Colombia than Medellin. And I think so much, from my standpoint, so much better, even though I love how modern it is there, and a lot of good restaurants and all of that. Living with expats, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail on this, but there's this, this negative connotation about, I don't want to go where expats are. Well, there may be reasons for that, but on the face of it, I wouldn't make that judgment just because they're expats. I wouldn't say I don't want my neighbor to be from the USA. I want him to be a good person, just like I would want a Colombian to be a good person, or an Ecuadorian. There's nothing wrong in and of itself to have these enclaves like Poblado, despite all the theorizing about it. I mean, think of it as, well, I often read it or get comments as it's a negative on the United States. It's the United States going into a place and ruining it and corrupting it. And I think you should stop, browbeating yourself, or if you're from Canada, stop beating up on yourself. Yeah, there's going to be jerks. There's jerks everywhere. You know what? There's a lot of jerks here in Colombia. that were born here, and the same in Ecuador. Jerks thrive. Well, they say what 10% of the population are basically going to be jerks, and that's no matter what country you're in. But think of it this way. You have no problems with Little Italy in New York City, for example, or a Chinatown. You know, they're interesting places to go. Now, as you're in Medellin, you're in Poblado. Think about the Colombians that come to Poblado to check out the gringos, to see how they live, like you're in a zoo. Kind of like, you know, we go to Little Italy because they've got such great restaurants there. And Elton Brown is back with his show Good Eats, and I watched his first one, and he had a really good point that I was aware of, but Italian food is not from Italy, and he explains why, and it's fascinating. If you haven't seen it, you know, watch it. It's on his chicken parmesan and how that food came to be. But then I love history, and I loved his show too, and I'm so happy it's back. But there's nothing wrong with Chinatowns in and of themselves. There's nothing wrong with Little Italy. There's nothing wrong with people kind of congregating with what they're familiar with. I think it's perfectly fine. So don't run them down. My last thing, and I'll see if I got questions here. I see a lot of script. I'll have to put my eyes right up on the screen. Okay, I did the thing on Gringo and was asked, well, of course it's negative because they say, you know, you're gringo gouging or you've been gringoed. And I just have to state the obvious here. Colombians or Ecuadorians or whatever country, they're not saying that. That's what gringos are saying is happening to them. You don't have a Colombian coming up and saying, I'm going to gringo you, or I'm going to gringo gouge you, or I'm going to, that's not what it's about. And I have to say that in whatever country, in most cases, it's actually misunderstanding. It's you don't understand the culture of what's happening, or you don't understand the language. Prime example, taxis here in Armenia. They're 45. I think they just went up 100 pesos, but we'll say they're 4,500 pesos. But on Sunday, they're 5,000 pesos. So a guy gets in the taxi and he rides, and it's 5,000 pesos, and he got gringoed. And he sends me a message about how he got screwed over, and he realized it's only 500 pesos, but it really annoyed him. He thought it wouldn't be like that here in Armenia. And it's like, it's printed right on the window in Spanish that on holidays, special events, or on Sundays, that it's increased fare. On the buses, it's 2,900, 2,800, but 2,900 if it's on a Sunday, or maybe 3,000. I don't know. I don't pay that much attention. I just pay it because I know I'm getting charged what it's supposed to be. So those terms don't come from, you know, local people, and those situations are rarely that you're getting gringoed. Although, you know, it happens here and there. Not so much here. I can't recall ever seeing it here. But in a place like Poblado, yeah, why not, right? You're there throwing away money. I might as well get a piece of it. But the worst gringoizing has to come from gringos. They're the biggest vultures of them all. Okay, let me see if we got questions. Minimum time needed to check out a place to see if it's a place that you want to live, because I said 2 weeks wasn't enough. Well, it's a fine line because short of moving here, it takes time. I would say at least a month if you can do it. If you're a brave soul that is willing to accept what comes your way, do it this way. Go ahead and dive in. You know, it costs money to go back and forth. Dive in, but leave yourself an escape plan. You know, have your plan B. So have your money set aside and your alternative. So if you go there and it's not what you think it is, it's not a big deal to move on. And when you go there for your first month, don't do anything permanent. Don't try to sign leases, or, well, you can't until you get your cedula, but you can get that, in a week or so. But you want to make sure that you don't bury yourself in, don't dig your roots yet until you spend some time doing it. Go back and watch the series of 5 videos interviewing the couple that went through Central America and through Colombia and Ecuador and Peru and ended up coming back to Colombia. Go watch those videos. They're very insightful. There's 5 of them, so probably 2-3 hours worth of stuff. But most of it I thought was really, really good information. How do I deal with a minor illness? A, go to see a doctor. B, pick up a remedy at the pharmacia. C, stay at home and suffer. Well, when I know it's the flu, if you older people like me had the flu enough times in your life, you know when it's the flu. And you know if it's taking a turn and maybe you better go do something. For me, I can go to the pharmacy and get something, but I just took aspirin for the fever. I ate lots of fruit. I got imported oranges from Florida. So good. So I'm eating oranges and drinking juice and having tea and all the things that that you do, and spending time in bed resting. I slept more than usual because of the fever. Normally I'm a 3, 4, 5 hour person, and there was a couple times I spent probably 12 hours in bed sleeping, to kind of get it out of your system. Now, if it was something else, it depends on what it is. I don't tend to have a lot of health issues. This is the first time. There's times when I just don't feel good, and it'll be for one reason or another. But since I've come to Armenia, so it's 9 months now, this is my first actual illness, flu, where I had symptoms and, I had to work through it. And the time before that was in Manizales. I got dog sick there, but it was kind of a leftover from the series of illnesses I was having in Ecuador. And so when I got there, not long after, I got the flu again. But since then, it's been real good up until now. And there's been flu going around here. Everywhere I go, you see people, kind of sneezing and sniffling. So it's bound to happen that I'm going to catch the flu again. So how do you handle it? I don't handle it any different than I did back in the USA. The video that's a surprise that I'm going to put up tomorrow, I have to narrate it. That's all that's left. It's all hidden camera. It's all about medical. I'm in Armenia now more than a month and love it. Yeah, places, I don't know. Should we be telling people? It's I arrived from the US Thursday and plan on staying 3 months to assess. That's a great idea. I'm curious as to arrived where are you? But that's a good period of time. Okay, on healthcare, what's your recommendation if you come for 3 months? What should I do? Sorry. I think if you're there's so many variations. For example, I have coverage in the United States through my VA benefits. So if I were to go to, let's say Venezuela cleared up and I could go visit, and I could go there and something happened out of the ordinary, I can fly back to the US and be treated there. So there's so many variations to this. But if you're a generally healthy person, you don't expect anything to come on. It's not horribly expensive just to go to they call them clinics. They're medical buildings, medical services. They're not clinics in the sense that we think of clinics, or the way I think of them. I think of a clinic as it's probably in a neighborhood that's subsidized medical and it's like that. Here, their clinics are basically medical services, medical buildings, and you will see soon. But it's not so expensive that you just can't go. Pay a doctor $20 to $30 for a doctor visit, maybe less. Various services that you might need. I'm going to hold up on this. Watch the video I put out tomorrow. Maybe that will help some of this. Any more questions? Last call for questions. Going once. Going twice. Did I put you all to sleep? Supposed to bring your coffee. Okay, that's it. Okay, that's it. Thank you. I will see you Wednesday.